feel important. You want to be a part of something bigger, something that matters and can help change things. You want to feel like you belong. We know. We felt that way too. And that's why we did something about it. We aren't just Army National Guard soldiers. We are normal people just like you. And together, we can make a difference. Take on your legacy. Visit NationalGuard.com to find out more.
Sponsored by the Wisconsin Army National Guard. Aired by the Wisconsin Broadcasters Association and this station.
Truth Nation, stand up and tap in. This is 1017 FM, 1510 AM WGKB Waukesha and W269DL Milwaukee, a locally owned Good Karma brand station.
It's time! It's time! It's beta time!
You are watching a master at work.
Truth Nation, get ready for the greatest 60 minutes in radio, giving you his authentic and bold opinions, bringing you all the information, entertainment, and conversations you gotta hear. From local issues to trending topics and headline news, it is time for Truth to Power with Kyle Wallace on the award-winning 1017 The Truth, The Truth app, 1017thetruth.com, and streaming live on YouTube. Now, live from the American Family Insurance Studio at the Avenue in the heart of downtown Milwaukee, here is your award-winning host, Kyle Wallace.
It is Truth to Power here on the award-winning 1017 The Truth. I am your host of Truth to Power, Kyle Wallace, and I am live from the American Family Insurance Studio at the 3rd Street Market Hall in the Avenue. I hope everybody had a beautiful and a safe weekend. Quick show today because we do have Milwaukee Brewers baseball. Go Brew Crew. We have Milwaukee Brewers baseball today. First pitch is at 1:10. Coverage begins at 12:35, and so it will be a shortened Truth to Power show, but it's going to be a very powerful show today on Truth to Power. So make sure you get in on YouTube at 1017 The Truth on YouTube. That is 101.7 The Truth on YouTube. Go ahead and give a thumbs up and make sure you subscribe as well so you never miss any of your favorite shows and favorite conversations. But today I am excited because I am being joined by Judge Susan Crawford, who's going to be joining us here today on Truth to Power. As you all know, Election Day is tomorrow. Polls are set to open. We'll open up at 7 a.m. And Wisconsin has been catapulted into national spotlight for our state Supreme Court race. So as our election nears, I wanted to make sure that you had an opportunity to hear from candidates themselves. And I am absolutely honored to be joined by Judge Susan Crawford, who is a Dane County Circuit Judge, who is currently running to be your next state Supreme Court judge here in the state of Wisconsin. Susan, thanks a lot for coming on and asking to join us here again and talk to Truth Nation.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Kyle.
Absolutely. We're going to jump right into it. I know your time is tight, and I want to make sure you can, have as much time as possible to talk to Truth Nation. But Susan, can you share with everyone your background and your credentials?
Yes, happy to. So, I started out my legal career at the Wisconsin Department of Justice as a prosecutor, working to keep our communities and families safe in Wisconsin. Then I was a lawyer for a long time, first in state government, including working in the governor's office for Governor Jim Doyle. Then was in practice in Madison, representing regular Wisconsinites like your listeners, fighting for their rights in our courts. And then I became a judge in 2018. So that's what I've done since then, just making sure that everybody who appears in front of me gets their day in court and that I'm protecting their rights under our laws. So now taking that to the Wisconsin Supreme Court, I want to be a judge who will interpret the laws fairly and impartially and make sure that Wisconsinites' rights under our Constitution are protected.
No, I love that so much. And, serving, being a public servant is quite the field to get into. What inspired you to get into that line of work, Susan?
Yeah, well, after I finished law school, I wanted to figure out a way to use, what I had learned to help people. And the best opportunity that I had was becoming a prosecutor straight out of law school. And that was a really important period in my career where I was working hard to do justice in our courts, really proud of the work I did then. But I've had a really broad legal career and have done work to protect people's constitutional rights and civil rights as well. And now, as I said, several years as a judge. So I've got, I think, exceptionally broad experience to bring to the role as well.
I appreciate you for sharing that. Now, as a potential Wisconsin State Supreme Court judge, what can you promise Wisconsinites about your judgment and what you would bring to the bench?
Yeah, well, what I can promise is that I'll always be fair, and I'll make sure that I'm applying the laws to equally protect the rights of all Wisconsinites. And I'm not going to be there to try to push a partisan agenda. My opponent has said that that's what he wants to do on the Wisconsin Supreme Court. But the Supreme Court is not a place for politics. It's just a place for the law. And I'm going to interpret the laws independently, fairly and impartially, and do what I believe is right for Wisconsinites.
I absolutely love that. Just apply the law, not playing partisan politics. And I think that leads to my next question, because your opponent, Brad Schimmel, is backed by billionaire Elon Musk, who has donated over $13 million plus to his campaign and is currently running amok as an unelected official in Washington. So can you tell me what makes Brad Schimmel so dangerous for Wisconsin?
Well, I think you identified it in that lead-in, Kyle. What's dangerous is that he seems willing to sell out justice to the highest bidder in Wisconsin. That's the richest man in the world, Elon Musk. Musk has spent over $25 million just in the last couple months on this race. He apparently thinks I'm, a danger to him and his business interests here in the state of Wisconsin. Elon Musk has a case that's working its way through the Wisconsin state courts that was filed by Tesla. They sued the state of Wisconsin just days before he started spending all that money. So he's interested. He wants to have some influence and some access over the judiciary in Wisconsin, and he thinks Brad Schimmel's the guy to do that for him.
Well, speaking of that case, what made you recuse yourself? Because I believe it was over the weekend or last Friday, you said that you would recuse yourself from that Tesla lawsuit. What exactly made you do that?
Yeah, that was actually not the Tesla lawsuit. That was a case that was filed against Elon. I think if we're talking about the same thing anyway, Kyle.
We probably are.
Filed against Elon Musk because he was planning to come to the state of Wisconsin and give away $1 million or $2 million.
Got it. Okay,
and
sounds
initially,
good.
he was promising it to people who voted, and then he kind of backed off that a little bit. But we know what he's up to here. He's trying to buy votes in Wisconsin.
Well, talking about buying votes in Wisconsin and giving away $1 million, I mean, it's intriguing to a lot of people. Why do you believe your opponent, Brad Schimmel, has been so silent on the subject?
Well, I think he's complicit with the whole thing. He knows exactly what Elon Musk is up to. They actually had a live streamed conversation a week or so ago. And Brad Schimmel started out his campaign saying he was going to nationalize this race. He was going to go after the conservative deep pockets to fund his campaign. That's exactly what he did. No mistake that Elon Musk is in this race. Brad Schimmel was out in Washington, D.C. over the inauguration, going to these high ticket price galas put on by conservative groups. And when he got back, he was joking around about the fact that he'd been on his knees begging for support. Said he was wearing out his knee pads and had to go to Menards and get some new ones.
That's what I heard. I support Menards, but I don't support doing that because I think the only people he should be begging, and not begging, is asking Wisconsinites for their vote and not asking people out in Washington to have control in our state. But personally, I had to say I'm a firm believer here, Susan, of that character matters and the company you keep matters. And I feel like it says a lot about you as a person and your morals, right? Like that's what character talks about. But your opponent, Brad Schimmel, has bragged about being on stage with somebody named Charlie Kirk, not sure if you're familiar, who has consistently made racially offensive comments about the black community. I don't know if you know this, Susan. I am black and I am offended. And also, he just retweeted something about rock artist Kid Rock, about him, being, celebrating him, who also is accused of using the N-word multiple times during an interview with Rolling Stones last year. What do you think all this says about Brad Schimmel's judgment?
Well, I have to say, Kyle, I am white, I'm Caucasian, and I'm offended. I don't abide by people talking like that. It's really damaging. It's damaging to all people, particularly black people that it's directed at, but it's really damaging to our community for having people who are expressing those kind of racist views. But I think it says a lot about Brad Schimmel that he would keep company with people like that. And I would not do that. If I knew that somebody who was supporting me was talking like that, I would say no thanks and decline to have an appearance with them, because it's not what I stand for. Those are not my views.
I appreciate that. I'm glad you have morals, unlike your opponent, Brad Schimmel. Now, also, there's been some Donald Trump talking in this election, and he's using the similar childish playbook of name calling hardworking Americans like yourself who may not see the world the way he does. Now, he recently called you a liberal lunatic. Do you have any response to that?
No.
Fair enough.
Response, Kyle.
Fair enough. I just want to give you an opportunity. But more importantly, what would you consider success, a successful term while being a state Supreme Court judge here?
Yeah. Well, I just want to serve honorably, and I want to make sure that I'm doing the job well. And to me, doing the job well means that I'll interpret our laws and Constitution to uphold the rights of Wisconsinites for 10 years. I plan to work really hard as a justice on the Supreme Court. And, the other part of the job, and one that we don't hear about as much as making decisions in those important cases, is that the Wisconsin Supreme Court really oversees the whole state court system. And that is another really important job, and one that I have been really involved in as a circuit court judge, just by, being serving on a lot of different committees. That's extra work. It's volunteer work I've done as a circuit court judge, and something I'm really interested in, because most cases that involve Wisconsinites happen at the circuit court level. Those are the county courts that hear all those cases, and they have to run well for our state to deliver justice to people in Wisconsin.
We are speaking with Judge Susan Crawford, who is running for the state Supreme Court race here in Wisconsin, a hotly contested race. Just a couple more here for you, Susan. I just want to know, in this election, why is this such a big election? Why is there so much attention? What is at stake during this election that will take place tomorrow?
Yeah, well, what's at stake is the future of our state, the future of our court, and everybody's fundamental rights and freedoms. And I think that the future of our court is at stake because my opponent is trying to politicize the court. He's really trying to turn it into an arm of the Trump administration. That's what he has said, that he wants to make the court part of a support network for Donald Trump. And we've heard his supporters, people like Elon Musk, saying that they believe that judges who rule against the Trump administration should be impeached, which is, not
Scary.
democratic. It's
That's
not
very scary.
And not the way that the court system or the justice system works in the United States of America. So this, really cannot be said too strongly. This election matters, and people should not sit this out. Don't give up your power. Your power is exercising your right to vote, and I encourage all your listeners to use their power tomorrow and show up at the polls.
Thank you so much, Susan. And lastly, with people getting out to vote tomorrow, can you just say the last reason why you would like them to vote for you when they head to the polls tomorrow on April 1st to be the next Wisconsin State Supreme Court judge?
Yeah, well, I've spent my whole career fighting to protect our communities, to protect Wisconsin families, fighting for our fundamental rights in our courts, first as a lawyer and now as a judge. I'm running this race, I believe, for the right reasons, which is to make sure that our laws and Constitution are interpreted and applied to protect Wisconsinites. So I am humbly asking for the votes of all your listeners today.
Sounds good. Thank you so much for joining us here today, Susan Crawford. And good luck tomorrow as you have campaigned across the state of Wisconsin. Thank you for your time.
Thanks so much, Kyle.
Right on time there. That was Judge Susan Crawford, who is running to be the next state Supreme Court justice here in the state of Wisconsin. Make sure y'all get out and vote tomorrow. Make sure y'all get out and vote tomorrow. Again, polls open tomorrow at 7 a.m. and close at 8 p.m. And again, y'all know where I stand on this election. I think she answered it correctly, right? Like, regardless of political affiliation or views, anybody that has any type of hateful rhetoric is somebody you should not associate with, but Brad Schimmel does not feel the same way. When we come back on the other side, I have an interview. I believe I have an interview with Coleston Morgan Jr. from Collective Forward. He'll be joining us coming up here next.
Thanks, Ms. Crawford.
with Kyle Wallace. We're going to talk about the state Supreme Court race, and also we're going to talk about, not state superintendent race, but also we're going to talk about how we can make sure that black kids in Milwaukee get the best education they deserve. Keep it locked. You're listening to Truth to Power here on the award-winning 101.7 The Truth.
Truth to Power with Kyle Wallace returns after this on 101.7 The Truth app, and streaming live on 101.7 The Truth on YouTube.
Calling all Black-owned business owners and entrepreneurs. Are you looking to share your story and grow your reach? We have teamed up with Associated Bank for our Black-owned business give back. Each quarter, 4 lucky business owners will win an opportunity to spotlight their brand and journey on the award-winning 101.7 The Truth. To sign up for your business spotlight interviews, visit blackbusinessgiveback.com. Let's rebuild our community's backbone through exposure on the truth. For official rules, head to blackbusinessgiveback.com. Associated Bank, member FDIC.
Hi, I'm Dr. Cass Bowers, Executive Director of All in Wisconsin. Did you know that there's an election coming up on April 1st? I encourage you to get out and vote. For democracy to work for all of us, it must include all of us. Vote to protect our rights and freedoms. I also urge you to vote no on the voter ID amendment on the ballot. Safe elections mean that no one is left out of the process, and we don't need more barriers to voting. Make your voices heard. Visit allinwi.org for more information.
What if you could ask a question that leads to cleaner water, discover aspects of the far reaches of space, or journey deep into data to improve healthcare? Researchers at the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee ask questions, find answers, and add to our understanding every day. Progress starts with the question. It starts at UWM, the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee.
President Trump and Elon Musk are forcing radical changes in Washington, from stopping payments for health care and threatening to restrict abortion rights to accessing Americans' private information. With Washington out of control, who we elect to the Wisconsin Supreme Court could be the last line of defense of our rights. The ACLU Voter Education Fund does not endorse or oppose candidates, but wants you to cast an informed vote in the Wisconsin Supreme Court election. So where do the candidates land on issues like abortion? Brad Schimmel stated he supports banning abortion. Susan Crawford successfully protected abortion rights while representing Planned Parenthood in Wisconsin. We need a Wisconsin Supreme Court that can be a check and balance to protect us when our rights are threatened at the federal level. On April 1st, Wisconsin voters will make a critical decision about the future of abortion in our state. To learn more about the Wisconsin Supreme Court candidates, visit aclu.org/WI2025. Paid for by ACLU Voter Education Fund, 212-549-2500. Not authorized by any candidate or candidate's agent or committee.
ACLU Voter Education Fund is responsible for the content of this advertising.
It is Truth to Power on 101.7 The Truth app, and streaming live on 101.7 The Truth on YouTube.
One call, that's all, with Gruber Law Offices. If you or a loved one is ever injured in an accident, don't hesitate to make one call, that's all, because they will truly take care of the rest. I'm telling y'all this right now. They focus on the legal aspect while you as a client focus on healing. And it's just one call, that's all, and they will take care of the rest. And what I love about them, Truth Nation, is there's no fee to call, there's no fee to consult. And the great thing about it is you never pay a single penny until they win your case. So don't haggle and go back and forth with insurance companies. Get the proven company like Gruber Law Offices that have results that speak for themselves. Call them today at 414-276-6666. That's 414-276-6666, or visit them at gruber-law.com. This is Truth to Power here on the award-winning 101.7 The Truth. And we just had Susan Crawford, Judge Susan Crawford, who is running to be your next state Supreme Court justice, join us here. And again, as the election is coming up, I want to make sure that we are keeping everybody as informed about everything on the ballot and everything happening in the community. And another race that is coming up, this is not race specific, but this is about education, right? The Department of Public Instruction oversees, the education for the state of Wisconsin, and there's a state superintendent race that is hotly contested as well that you'll have to make a choice at the ballots tomorrow. So right now, I'm going to be joined by Celestin Morgan Jr., who is the executive director of City Forward Collective. Celestin, thank you so much for joining me here today.
Thanks so much for having me.
Absolutely, absolutely. Now, I saw a press release come out on Friday discussing how Tony Evers vetoed restoring a controversial overhaul on how the state measures academic achievement. Why was Forward Collective so supportive of the bill, and what all was changed by DPI? What can you just tell us more background about that?
Yeah, great question. So These standards were first put in place by Governor Evers when he was state superintendent. For a long time, we've had standards that align to the nation's report card. You've heard us talk about NAEP probably in some of these conversations. Those standards help us know how our kids are doing. They let us compare how students in Milwaukee are doing to students elsewhere in the state, how students in Wisconsin are doing to elsewhere in the country. What happened about a year or so ago is that DPI lowered those standards. They changed the cut scores and the thresholds, lots of sort of technical stuff that was under the hood. But what ended up happening is magically overnight, we went from 30% of students meeting standards to 50% of students in the state meeting standards. Here in Milwaukee, the number of students meeting standards doubled. It's not that many more kids are performing on grade level. I wish it were true. But what DPI did was, right, they changed the bar. They changed the marks instead of actually, they call it an honesty gap. So rather than dealing with where students are actually performing, they decided to sort of juke the numbers. We objected to that, and we've objected to it every time that's happened. And so that's why we were supportive of a bill that was running through the legislature, Assembly Bill 1, that would have simply restored the standards that Governor Evers put in place a decade ago. Which we think are the right standards. They're rigorous. They prepare kids. They're aligned to kids being prepared for college and career. That's what we need to have, right? More honesty, more transparency about how our students are performing. So that's why we were supportive of that bill.
No, I definitely agree because the fact is that they have high, NAEP has high standards, and I think Wisconsin has high standards. And kind of going to that is that Wisconsin does rank 10th in the nation for NAEP scores, and then cumulative scores, but then on top of that, we're ranked 6th in the latest U.S. News and World Report for public education. Why is this success not reflected in our black and brown students here in Milwaukee?
Yeah, well, let me set aside U.S. News and World Report. My first career was in education data. I led data for a large school district, not in Wisconsin, so I nerd out a little bit. We don't really use the U.S. News and World Report ratings as much, but the NAEP results are definitely real, and sidebar, but an important one. That's why it's so important that what's going on the federal level is so troubling, because we need those NAEP results to continue. And whatever's going on in the Department of Education, we got to make sure that states and districts have the data and information that they need. But you asked me about what's going on with black students in Milwaukee.
Yeah.
This isn't new, right? It has been decades, generations. I'm almost 40. I'm raising my kids now. And when my mother was looking for schools for me, 30 some odd years ago.
You were raised in Milwaukee? Did she ship you out of Milwaukee, or did she?
Eventually, yes, right?
That's what happens.
Started at Milwaukee Public School. She, and got a good education at the MPS school I was at, mind you. But when we were looking for middle schools, couldn't find the right option, and I ended up at a private school, not through the voucher program in my case, but this story, you can go back and find reports going back to the 1970s talking about the challenges facing black students in the city of Milwaukee. We have, I remember when I was a kid in the 90s, the largest black-white gap of any state in the country here in Wisconsin. When we got the NAEP results in January, largest black-white gap in the country here in Wisconsin. More than half of Wisconsin's black students are educated in Milwaukee. Now, some things have changed underneath that, right? About half of our kids are outside of MPS. About half of our kids are inside of MPS. So this isn't a MPS problem alone anymore. Certainly there's some issues there, but we got issues across the board.
Yeah.
Because we haven't focused on making sure our kids know how to read, write, do math, are prepared for whatever their future is going to take them, right? If that's college, if that's going into a trade or a career, if it's going into the military, whatever it is they want to do next in life, we're not preparing them for that. And we got to get serious about that. And that for us begins with facing what are sometimes brutal facts. And that's why we think it's so important that we have honest and accurate data.
Yeah, see, that's the thing that matters to me, right, is making sure that we have honest and accurate data, but also making sure that we close that gap. And what at the Forward Collective are you all doing to help close that gap?
Yeah, good question, right? So we do our work in 4 ways. We try to inform, right? So basic information, trying to understand how are all of our students and all of our schools doing across the city. We do our work through engagement. We work with parents directly. We work with our school leaders. We work with those who are serving on the governing boards of charter and private schools across the city to try to make them aware of the issues. Of course, we advocate, we engage in policy. I'm in the Capitol. We led efforts to increase funding for schools last session. We've had conversations about this honesty gap. We'll continue to be advocates for ensuring that all of our kids, beginning from early childhood all the way through, have the resources that they need. And then finally, we try to catalyze the growth of more high-quality schools. We know, you talked about accountability. I've talked about transparency and honesty. The third leg here is quality, right? And there are quality schools in every sector of the city and every geography of the city, but not nearly enough of them. And quite frankly, especially not nearly enough of them in our communities on the north side of Milwaukee. And that's work that we have to do. And so that's how we are working to address this gap.
I'm so appreciative of that because I think as someone who I grew up in Milwaukee but went through the 220 program, you someone who grew up in Milwaukee but went to a private school, you had other opportunities, right? But and I know your credentials, Ivy League graduate, and so I understand you have some high credentials. and so I
you didn't have to put me out there.
But I just think it's so important because we talk about the potential that we have as Black students, but we just don't have the opportunities, right? And that's the most important thing. And so that's kind of leads me to my next thing is talking about opportunities, because one of my fears, because I do know that we talked about that Assembly Bill number 1. I know it had some type of it did have some Republicans and Democrats that were part of it, but my biggest concern with that was it wasn't really about them caring. It was about trying to make the news and headlines before an election, and so that was my concern with that. But my biggest concern is a lot of times it's Republicans who really want to expand the voucher program, and they're looking to expand the voucher program to allow for higher income individuals to take advantage of that. How do we make sure that it doesn't allow for more, and I can say it, white students to take more seats? Because for me, when I look at Milwaukee, the income for our Black community, it ain't just going up, right? And so I feel like if they're talking about expanding the voucher program, if they're talking about allowing more white kids to get into the program who have come from higher income houses, how do we make sure we combat that to ensure that our Black students are still getting the seats that they need in that program?
Yeah, it's a good question. So let me separate the Milwaukee program from the rest of the state for a minute.
Yes, sir.
So right here in Milwaukee, right, we have had the Milwaukee Parental Choice Program in some shape or form since the early 90s. All right, our income limit is at 300% of the poverty limit. It's like just under $100,000 or so this year. Almost all of our families across the city, almost all of our families in our Black community qualify. It's a whole nother conversation for another day about how we need to create more wealth in our community. But for where we are right now, our families are, and there's no enrollment cap. As many students as want to apply, right? That was a battle maybe 15 or 20 or so years ago. But at least in Milwaukee, we don't have an enrollment cap. The income limits are sufficiently high that all of our families are able to access the program, or almost all of our families are able to access the program, right? To me, this conversation has been stuck in this place of, one side versus the other. Money that's going into this system is going away from that. And frankly, when we poll on this, when we talk to parents about this, that's not how they think about this, right? My mother, your parents, whoever, right, they're trying to find the right school for their kid. Frankly, half the time they don't know if it's a public charter school or a private school or how they get funded, right? When we were doing our advocacy 2 years ago talking about the need for equal funding and what was then a $300 million gap that our city was facing because students in our charter and private schools weren't being funded at the same level, lots of families, one, didn't know what type of school they were in, two, didn't know that the funding was that different. And then three, when you start to talk to them about it, you realize actually one of the kids is at an MPS school and the other one's at a private school, because they're not sitting here thinking I'm only going to send my kid to a Catholic school, right? Like that's just not how most people, right? Like, I got 2 daughters, and when I try to figure this out for them, the way I try to figure this out, like, what do they need? What do each of my girls need now, and how do I make sure they get it?
Yeah.
And so to me, that's really where the conversation has to start. There's been, this abundance conversation, right, that we're having at this national level. We need to bring that into K-12 education, and we need to bring that into education here in Milwaukee.
Thank you. Colette Morgan, Jr., Executive Director of City 4 Collective, is here on Truth to Power. And lastly, only got about 2 minutes here, but I do want to talk about this one's accountability, because we have some really good choice charter and private schools in the state of Wisconsin, but also we have some bad ones, right? And so with the bad ones that have, low test scores, how do we have the accountability to make sure schools that have these low test scores aren't continuing to get, praised up and raised up as if, like, just because you got on a shirt and tie don't mean your kids is getting smarter?
Absolutely. And to be clear, exactly what you said, right? We've got some great schools in every sector in every part of our city, and we've got some struggling schools in every sector in every part of our city. We got to start by being honest about that, right? This is not like, one side good, one side bad, either way, right? And I think that's often the conversation, right? Either it's, if you're not MPS, you're bad, or if you are MPS, you're bad. No, we've got good schools all the way around, and we got challenges all the way around. So we got to start by being honest about the information and clear about that. And then we actually do have to do something when we see that kids are in a school year after year that's not meeting expectations. And again, that's got to be across the board.
Celestin Morgan Jr., Executive Director of City 4 Collective. You all are trying to do some great work that I know I'm personally passionate about, because at the end of the day, I know Milwaukee only becomes a better city if the future of Milwaukee, the black kids in Milwaukee, the population that makes up the majority of Milwaukee, has the education they deserve. So I appreciate all the work you all are doing at City 4 Collective, and I know this won't be our last time to talk.
I appreciate it. We'll definitely be back. Thank you.
Thank you so much again to Celestin Morgan Jr. for joining us here today. In Truth Nation, I just want to say thank y'all so much for joining us here today, as well as I'm going to lead you up into coverage for the Brewers game. But with that being said, I just want to make sure that I want to encourage everybody. Tomorrow is Election Day. Let's get out and vote. Let's use our voice, because you know what? What happens tomorrow will determine the mess that we're going to be in. I know I said this last week on my show, but the fact that Elon Musk and Donald Trump and heck, even Barack Obama made endorsements, this race is important. And we cannot sit on the sideline and let other people determine what our future is. We must utilize our voice through voting tomorrow on Election Day. So make sure you find any way to get to the polls, and make sure you tell somebody that can tell somebody that can tell somebody to get out and vote on April 1st. Polls open up at 7 a.m. and they will close at 8 p.m. So again, I'll be back on air tomorrow. I'll be joined by Eric Holder, Attorney General, former U.S. Attorney General Eric Holder, and he'll also have a conversation about the importance on voting. So please get out and use your power to vote and enact the change that you want to see here in Milwaukee. Again, thank you so much to George Susan Crawford for joining us here today. Thank you so much to Celestin Morgan Jr. for joining us here today. Brewers baseball is up next. No Tory Lowe show today. We have Brewers baseball up next. Y'all enjoy the home opener. Truth to Power will be back tomorrow. Peace out. See y'all tomorrow.
Elon Musk and Donald Trump are out of control, slashing healthcare and food for hungry kids, eliminating the Department of Education. Now, Musk and Trump are trying to buy a seat on the Wisconsin Supreme Court, spending millions to elect extremist Brad Schimmel. And if elected, Schimmel wants to criminalize abortion, even in cases of rape and incest. Brad Schimmel, an extreme rubber stamp for Musk and Trump, and wrong for Wisconsin. We need justices who are fair, who know right from wrong. Judge Susan Crawford has spent her life standing up for Wisconsin and keeping us safe. She'll always protect our right to choose, and Crawford will be the check and balance we need against Elon Musk and Donald Trump. On April 1st, vote Susan Crawford for Supreme Court. Go to www.iwillvote.com to find out where and how to cast your vote by April 1st. Paid for by Power to the Polls Action Fund, not authorized by any candidate or candidate's agent or committee.
This is your Versity Blood Center of Wisconsin Community Impact Moment on 101.7 The Truth.
And what are some of the ways that you're inspiring people? Because, one of the biggest opportunities, in particular in the African-American community, is access, exposure, and awareness.
For Versity Blood Center of Wisconsin, we've been here 76 years.
Wow.
And our mantra is saving the lives you love. So if someone you love needs a blood transfusion and they're in any hospital in Southeast Wisconsin here, that blood's coming from us. And so we're trying to make sure that we're communicating that, because I think folks maybe don't understand that blood can't be manufactured. And summers are always tough because schools are out and we collect about 20 to 25% of our blood from schools. Mm-hmm. So it's always a day-to-day struggle. We say that the blood that's on the shelves is the blood that saves lives. And a lot of times people are compelled to donate when something bad happens. And our mission and our job is to educate folks so that we can get ahead of the curve and keep 3 days of inventory on the shelves. Mm-hmm. So we're in a decent spot right now, but we're on the streets every day trying to inspire people to join our mission. One of our big projects that we're proud of is Versity on King, which is part of the Thrive On collaboration in the Gimbel Schuster building on Martin Luther King Drive. And next year, we're going to open a destination center there. It'll be a blood donation center, but it'll be more than that, because we've realized that we can't be transactional with our relationships in the Black community. We need to do things that are intentional and that show that we're there to stay. But the reason that we're there is because not enough people that look like us donate. And so for disorders like sickle cell disease that disproportionately affect us, the race can matter. But I like to say that, Black folks have a superpower in their blood. 44% of Black blood donors will have this rare trait that makes their blood more likely to be able to be a match for a sickle cell patient. And that 44%, that is way higher than what we would find in other races.
To make an impact by donating blood in your community, visit versity.org today.
With Donald Trump dismantling the federal Department of Education, we need to make sure we have someone we trust running Wisconsin public schools. That's Democrat